I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to get cheated on, but that was exactly what happened. My wife, Betty, had always seemed so perfect, beautiful, smart, and caring, at least when we first got together. We had been married for 5 years, and in those early days, everything felt like a dream. We'd laugh, go on dates, and talk about the future. It felt like we were a team, always in sync with each other. But over time, things started to change, and I began to notice small shifts in her behavior that I couldn't ignore. She started working late more often, claiming she had a big project at work that demanded her time. At first, I believed her, but as the weeks went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She was distant when she was home, barely engaging in conversations like she used to. I'd catch her staring at her phone more than talking to me. I'd ask her about her day, and the answers would be vague, as if she didn't want to share anything anymore. The little things began adding up, but I didn't want to be the guy who accused his wife of something without proof. So I kept quiet and tried to brush it off. Then, one night, I was looking for a charger in the drawer of the kitchen table, and I found her phone. She had left it behind by mistake, and for some reason I couldn't resist checking it. I knew it was wrong, but something inside me urged me to look. I found a string of text messages from a guy named Gene. At first, I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe he was just a coworker or a friend. But the more I read, the clearer it became. These weren't just friendly texts, they were flirtatious, intimate, and personal. I saw words that no husband ever wants to read: how much she missed him, how he was the one who understood her, and how they couldn't wait to see each other again. My heart sank. I couldn't breathe. I felt sick, crushed, like the floor had been ripped out from under me. I couldn't believe what I was reading, but there it was, plain as day. I tried to make sense of it, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. How long had this been going on? Was I really that blind to not see it? How could she do this to me? It felt like everything I had known, everything I believed about her, was nothing but a lie. I remember the day I confronted her like it was yesterday. Betty walked in with a smile on her face, completely unaware of what I had just discovered. She kissed me on the cheek like everything was normal, like nothing had changed. But I couldn't act like everything was fine. I couldn't pretend I didn't know what was really going on. I asked her to sit down, and as I did, my heart was pounding in my chest. I wasn't sure if I wanted to cry, scream, or just walk away. I was shaking inside, but I had to face this, to confront her and get the truth. There was no turning back now. When I showed her the messages, her face turned pale. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock, then to guilt. She started to stutter, trying to come up with an explanation, but I could see the truth in her eyes. She tried to deny it at first, saying it was just friendly banter, nothing serious, but her shaky voice betrayed her, and I could tell she was lying. I didn't need her to admit it outright because I already knew. The proof was right in front of me. She didn't seem as remorseful as I expected. She was more defensive than anything else. She told me it wasn't about me, that she wasn't unhappy with our relationship. She claimed Gene had just been there for her during a difficult time, that he made her feel seen and heard when I was too busy with work. And then she said something that hit me harder than anything else. She said she wasn't sure if she loved me anymore, that maybe she was just lost in her career and didn't know who she was anymore. That was when the anger hit me. How could she stand there and say that to me? How could she justify what she had done? She made it sound like it was all some kind of mistake, like it wasn't her fault. I had been nothing but faithful, nothing but there for her, and this is how she repaid me. It felt like a slap to the face. My mind was racing with all the memories of us, everything we had built together, and now I was seeing it all crumble in front of me. She begged me to understand, but I couldn't hear it anymore. I wasn't asking for her excuses, I was asking for honesty. And all I got was her blaming everything on me. I was done. I had given her every chance to come clean, and now I was left with nothing but the painful reality that the woman I loved wasn't the person I thought she was. I didn't say much after that. I couldn't. I just walked away. I decided to take a step back and give myself some space. I couldn't just let the betrayal slide. I needed time to process everything that had happened. The anger still burned inside me, but I didn't want to make any rash decisions. Part of me wanted to lash out, to do something that would hurt Betty the way she had hurt me, but I knew that wouldn't solve anything. I had to think this through carefully. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't want to just get revenge in the moment. I wanted to make sure that when Betty realized the truth of what she had done, it would hit her hard. She needed to understand the consequences of her actions, not just feel guilt for a moment and then move on. I spent days in a haze, trying to figure out my next move. I kept my distance from Betty. She tried to talk to me, begged for my forgiveness, but I couldn't even look at her without feeling disgusted. I could hear her voice, see the tears in her eyes, but none of that mattered anymore. She had chosen him, and that hurt more than anything. I couldn't let her think that she could just walk back into my life because things weren't going well with her affair. She didn't deserve that. But at the same time, I wanted to understand more about what was going on. I had to know the details. I started keeping an eye on Betty's movements, paying attention to what she did, when she came and went, and who she spent time with. One thing I knew for sure, Jean was still in the picture, even though Betty insisted it was over. I didn't trust her anymore, and I wasn't about to let her lie to my face. The more I watched, the more I realized that Betty was caught in a trap of her own making. She had put all her hopes on Jean, thinking he was going to be her way out, but Jean was losing everything. His big investments had gone south, and now he was in serious financial trouble. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction, though I hated myself for it. It was the first real sign of karma coming back to bite them both. Jean's life was falling apart, and Betty was stuck holding to pieces, just like I had been. I knew she had made her bed, but I also knew that this was just the beginning of her downfall. It didn't take long for Betty to come crawling back to me. After Jean's bankruptcy, she realized just how much she had lost, and now I was the only person left who could help her pick up the pieces. One evening, she showed up at my door. I wasn't expecting her, and when I opened it, she was standing there, looking completely different from the woman who had walked out on me. She was a mess, her eyes were red, her face pale, and she was shaking. It was like she had aged 10 years in the short time since we last spoke. She barely said a word before she started crying, and I could see just how desperate she had become. She apologized over and over, begging for forgiveness. She was almost pleading with me, telling me that she had made the biggest mistake of her life. Her voice cracked as she said she was sorry for everything, the affair, the lies, the hurt she had caused. She claimed that Jean was nothing but a mistake, that he had been a distraction from the real problems in her life. She tried to convince me that she hadn't meant to hurt me, that she was lost and confused. She told me she had realized just how much I meant to her and that everything was over with Jean. She swore she wanted to be with me, that she loved me, and was willing to do whatever it took to fix things. But I wasn't the same guy anymore. The man who had loved her unconditionally, who had trusted her completely, was gone. The hurt ran too deep, and her apology felt hollow. I had seen this side of her before, the sweet, apologetic wife who would say anything to make things right when things weren't going her way. But what she didn't understand was that I had changed. I had been broken, and it wasn't something that could be fixed with a few words. It wasn't something she could just undo by showing up at my door and asking for forgiveness. She begged and begged, but the more she spoke, the more I realized that none of this was for me. It wasn't about making things right, it was about her wanting to save herself. She needed me to help her rebuild her life, to give her a place to stay, to be the man who would pick her up after she had torn everything down. And as much as I loved her, I knew I couldn't do that. I wasn't going to be her safety net, the one she ran to when everything fell apart. I stayed calm, but my heart was cold. I didn't need her anymore. I didn't need her words or her promises. I had realized that I was better off without her. The real revenge wasn't about hurting Betty physically or even emotionally, it was about walking away with my head held high. I didn't need her anymore. I had reached a point where I had rebuilt myself emotionally and financially. The betrayal had stung, but in the process I had become someone stronger, someone who no longer depended on her for validation or happiness. When Betty came to me, crying, begging me to take her back, I could feel the desperation in her voice, but I also knew something deeper. She was only looking for comfort, for security, for a way to escape the mess she had made. But I wasn't going to be her safety net anymore. I wasn't going to be the one who cleaned up her mistakes. She had broken me once, and now I was whole again. The best revenge wasn't about making her feel the same pain I had, it was about showing her that I could walk away and be just fine without her. She had thought she could replace me with someone else, someone who would give her the excitement and attention she thought she wanted. But when Gene's world crumbled, when his promises turned to dust, she had nothing left. And in that moment, I realized that her actions had been motivated by her own insecurities, not by any love or respect for me. I didn't need to rub it in her face. I didn't need to say anything cruel or spiteful. I had nothing to prove anymore. The silence between us was all the response I needed to give. I stood there listening to her apologies, but the words didn't carry weight anymore. I had heard them all before, and they no longer meant anything to me. I didn't want her back, and she had to understand that. It wasn't because I hated her or didn't care about her anymore. It was because I had learned to love myself. The betrayal had made me question my worth, but now I knew better. I didn't need her to complete me, I was already whole. And the more I thought about it, the more empowering it felt to know that I could walk away, to know that I didn't need her for happiness or fulfillment. I didn't get revenge by making her suffer. I got revenge by living my life without her. She could beg all she wanted, but in the end she would have to live with the fact that she had lost the person who truly valued her, and that was something I could walk away from without a second thought.